Hello everyone, welcome to another Western Tabletop update. This is actually on the latest FAQ that has dropped for Bolt Action this morning for me in Perth. Got up and had a read and was interested to see what we were getting across. This one's not actually that bad, I think, in consideration of what has been in the past. We don't have any changes to Tiger Fear, for example, so we can know that that's the same. But in particular, we've had some amended units come across from some of the campaign books specifically for Germany. So that's the UNIC P107 Command Half Track, the Bedford E Armoured Carrier, the Renault R35 conversions that they did in early France, and then the Flak Panzer, I believe it's Carillion or Corlion, apologies for the pronunciation there. That was largely a prototype tank that didn't make it too much past prototyping, so that might cause a little bit of an angst for some people because it wasn't real. Look, it was in a campaign book already. That decision's been made. It's just putting it into the FAQ and the additional units like they have with everything else. A few other errata updates. So the USA entry updates for Armies of, they got some minor changes. The M5 Stuart now can take Recce for 10 points. The sniper team's reduction for veteran and regular, I think they're back in line with everyone else now, just clearly stating it as 50 points, and I think it's 65 points. Go check those out if you're a US player. Otherwise, unaffected. Great Britain got some alteration to Little John adapters. Specifically, I think that's just the wording changes. I couldn't see anything specifically different in that space, but I don't play British that often, so I could have missed something there. So check that one out. Soviets, they got some small changes. T-28, the machine gun that was previously automatically pintle mounted, that's gone to a rear turret facing machine gun, and you can purchase the pintle additional. The addition of the sniper selection to the Sevastopol, I'm going to murder that name, apologies. That selected didn't have a sniper, it should have, and it's now included. No big difference there. Super heavy and heavy anti-tank guns or artillery pieces dismounting from a toes has been validated that they do get to do that 6-inch move when they pull away from the toe as part of that dismount and the run order. Essentially, they're being carried by the vehicle. It's just easier to go, yes, they can do the 6 inches rather than restricted to 3 or 0 or whatever. They've also updated the previous FAQ response, which was, can a super heavy or heavy anti-tank gun or artillery piece that is off the board without a toe when it comes on? They've just updated to clarify that it does in fact apply to all types of artillery or anti-tank units. So it's super heavy and heavy anti-tank guns or artillery or howitzer. So it's essentially, yes, we mean this to include absolutely everything. So that will go away. When we come into one of the other small changes that came through was the Recce ruling, which I mentioned in the previous FAQ update, which I had some challenges on, but hey, look, we'll work within that. One of the biggest things was that when the Recce unit escaped whilst being on ambush, they went to a run order, which basically made them immune to assaults, as that was probably the big key difference. That has changed. They now will get set to a down order as what they would have from an escape reaction, which means that they'll still be susceptible to an assault if they're cornered, if they're somehow trapped, if they can't get away, and they're within that 12-inch bubble from a charging unit, pending and not over terrain. Then yes, they're still going to get charged. So that's probably a good clarification just to keep everything aligned, and it was good to see that one just tidied up a little bit. What else is on my list here? Romania got a restriction, or more specifically a clarification that when they use the free artillery unit from the French doctrine, they can only take that as a light or a medium artillery or anti-tank piece, as opposed to a heavy. Tough luck, but I guess we just have to roll with that one. We've got some campaign updates, but the big piece that everyone online immediately blew up about was the interaction between Flamethrowers and Fanatic, the special rule Fanatics. So in some areas it was played that Flamethrowers, because they invoked their own special morale check, that it was exempt from the restrictions that are placed on it by Fanatics, which is where they simply auto-pass those checks. The FAQ is now clarified that's not the case. Flamethrowers do not generate a separate morale check. It is in fact inflicting a normal morale check. It just ignores the 50% casualty ruling. So fanatical units, i.e. the entire Japanese army is probably the big one that comes to mind, where those units are fanatic. They're just going to auto pass that test from a Flamethrower, so we're not going to be able to what was known as auto delete Japanese units with Flamethrowers anymore. That means we're going to have to find other ways to get around it. It means we're going to have to use other units, but it's also important to recognize that the Japanese army are not the only army with Fanatics, and every army, like my early war, NKVD, Fanatic, Border Force, they are now affected by that too. So the dice may not have gone the way that people would have been playing on that one. I actually kind of prefer it this way because at least it keeps it aligned to the same thing, whereas like it's one morale check in the damage step, when the damage process, we know now that it's just one, that it's not a separate instance. It's going to remove all that confusion, and if it means that Fanatic units don't get to do it, I guess that just didn't go our way. Campaign book updates. This probably for me is a personal one as a TO that I was really glad to see, and that's changes to the Naval Observer. So introduced through a campaign book, they've now had a point increase. So a regular Naval Observer is going to be 180 points. A veteran Naval Observer is going to be 195 points. On top of that, if a British player is using a Naval Observer as their free observer, they have to pay 80 points to get that upgraded to a Naval Observer. I think point-wise, that's a very needed change, so it was good to see this come through. Also, the damage results have been altered. So when for rolling and attacking on vehicles, instead of it being 2 to 4, that it's superficial damage on the damage table, it's now 2 to 5. And that means that the chance of your tanks instantly being flipped over goes from a 30% chance to a 16% chance, because it's now only the roll of a 6. For balancing gameplay, I'd struggle to say that that's anything other than fair. You now have points to pay for it as well. It's still the ability on the roll of a 6 to annihilate automatically any tank on the board or any vehicle on the board. And on a 2 to 5, you're still potentially setting that thing on fire. So, I mean, people who have played with them are probably going to be disappointed about that. People who have come up against them are probably going to be really happy about that. As a TO, I'm sort of happy in both camps because I've got rulings that I can now go, well, this is what the FAQ says that we'll do, and I can choose whether we adapt or change that further as needed. Probably won't, probably will just stick with what's on the paper. Gyro stabilizers from Battle for the Bulge. If you're using French forces but leveraging US equipment, they've confirmed that you do get the gyro stabilizer rule from the US book. Western Desert Kubelwagen groups, I can never say their actual squad name or column name properly, so I'm not going to try that. It's just the group of vehicles that are generally Kubelwagens running around with multiple machine guns. They've clarified that you buy that unit as one selection, as a group, but they operate independently. They're not meant to operate as a specific unit. If people wanted to, there are some optional rules on the main rule book, page 217, I think it is, which allows you to do vehicle squadrons, but they say that's not the intent explicitly of that group. It's simply you get more for one choice, and then they run independently. So if you want the benefits of them being together, you have to run separate units essentially together. And then the Marina and Palau Islands, there's a couple of minor updates in there. Most of these are actually, there's I think 3 of them, they're actually just clarifications of things that are there. So how dug in works and whether it's rounding up or down and things like that. It's nothing particularly major, validation of some of the things that were in selectors. But look, that's actually really it that's come through for the FAQ. So this one's quite mild considering ones we've had in the past. So the big pieces there, the big call outs to wrap up. Flamethrowers and Fanatic, it's got a way that it's got to go now. We'll all just have to get used to the new way of that working if you played it differently. Naval Observer changes, that's a fairly big one. The Recce ruling and not being immune to assaults, that's quite a critical one at sometimes. Edge case, certainly, but good to see that clarified. And then super heavy changes to make sure that they're all included in that tow restrictions or the tow 6-inch dismount and coming onto the board. So, I mean, for me, they're the ones that stand out the most and the ones that are probably, I think, actually fair to be done. So, look, provide any comments. There's a few more that I think we'll probably see coming over the next probably 12 months or so as more feedback comes through. Don't get caught up in the internet hyperbole of whether things need to be done as a version 3 or not. Warlord will work that out, right? Like, most of these things are erratas, so it's, okay, there's typos and reprints that they could fix those with. The other things that FAQs, there's a lot of those that have been in since version 1. So those sorts of things, it's like they're frequently asked questions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do a rulebook. That being said, hey, if we do, it'll all be in one package, right? So that'll be good. All right. Look, anyway, that's all we've got for this one. Nice and simple, keeping it clean. But if you've got any comments and questions, please reach out. Cheers.